Greetings, great things. This is Q Talks once again. Welcome back to Black Swan Theory. I am actually on holiday, hence the slightly delayed episode post, but this is episode number 3, and today we're getting even deeper, as we like to do here. We don't stay on the surface. So today's conversation is going to be, or today's topic is going to be titled Die to Live. And it's going to be death talk. We're going to be talking about death from many perspectives, metaphorically, as well as, actual death. I do have my phone, some notes that I'm referring to, but I am gonna try to branch off of them and not just be reading off of that, because I feel like there is a lot on this topic that I'd like to discuss. And sometimes when I have notes in front of me, they can kind of restrict or confuse me. If I'm jumping around, guys, there's bugs, there's flies, I'm not used to this, okay? And I don't like, if you know me, I don't like insects, so bear with me if at any point I jump or scream or it just looks like I keep moving. It's the flies, okay? Um so yeah, this topic is something that fascinates me so much, and if you're alive, then I'm sure at one point you have thought about or considered the topic, the concept of death, right? So let's talk about the paradox of death and life. We talk a lot about growth, right? In life, we talk a lot about moving forward, getting more, growing, but rarely about what has to die first in order for this growth to occur. Sometimes life feels like it's falling apart, but it's actually rearranging itself. And I'm sure many of us can relate to this, especially if you're on the internet or you're aware of, just different thoughts of philosophy, such as, for example, ego death. So it's like that, but death itself is so intertwined with this life that we live, despite our desire to not acknowledge it or see it as such. And another way you can look at it is even in gardens and gardening, right? Things have to die in the garden, or things that are dead have to be used to fertilize the garden. When things die in nature, in the cycles of nature, we see this. Things die and they resurrect. There is death, there is resurrection, right? But death makes way for life, for growth, for new opportunity. So whether it's death, whether it's ego death endings, they all sound scary to us from our perspective, especially when you're not aware of, again, how much death is a part of life. But they are the same door that life walks through every single time, as I have already given a few examples for, and I will continue to. It goes so deep, as there are many other schools of thoughts that believe even when we breathe in and out, we are experiencing life and death, right? Because the inhale is the inhale, the exhale is the exhale, but there is a pause in between. And that's I think comes from an Egyptian school of thought, if I'm not mistaken. There are also, again, philosophies and schools of thought that believe that when we sleep, we go to sleep at night, we die. And when we wake up, we are born again. Every new day we are born again. Every new breath we are born again. So this shows you how much, like I said, this idea of ending, this idea of departing, this idea of what we like to call closing or finishing, is the part of the beginning. That saying, this is not the end, this is just the beginning. might have heard that saying before. So, oh, bomb, blood seed, boy, hold on. Sorry, guys. So, personally, you know, and I know some people have had near death experiences in life, right? And basically, the reason why I want to talk about this topic and familiarize it, talk about it as lightly, maybe, or candidly as I am, is because as much as we dislike or fear or have our qualms with this topic, it is a part of our life. And we cannot escape this. The more we integrate it, accept it, the more life itself will make sense, and we will live it in a way that is honoring it correctly. Because you can't just pick one side of this situation. We know this because we all know that the end is going to come for each and every single one of us, right? So as much as we want life, as much as we love life, as much as we cling to life, we know that it is not everlasting, and we know that it is not the only part of what this is. So, you know, like I said, even people that have near-death experiences, they come back from these experiences, or they are often changed by these experiences because they either go through something, see something, or just reflect on the whole experience and realize, whoa, I was there, but I am still here. And it changes and reimagines their idea and their concept of what it means to be here. The experience of death can fuel life, right? And I want to talk about my own personal experiences, symbolic as well as actual. Last year, something that not a lot of people know, but I did talk about it. There is a video if you scroll further back. I had a severe allergic reaction, which to me was the closest that I hope to ever come, and the closest I felt to a near-death experience, because I essentially had an allergic reaction to a chemical that I didn't know that I was allergic to, but that I found out that I was allergic to. And this chemical was like a poison to my system. Just a tiny exposure to it caused my body to react to it for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. I'm talking about 4+, 5+, 6+ weeks of reacting to one chemical that touched me once, and I washed it off, right? So I won't go into all of the details of that, but that was, for me, a very rebirthing kind of experience. And there are a lot of, again, schools of thought, shamanic schools of thought, that believe that people that are about to be initiated go through certain traumatic or near-death experiences before they ascend to another level of consciousness, understanding, life experience, whatever you want to call it. So I'm not saying that's what happened to me. I'm saying this is part of the story of life, and I'm just telling you where I fit in. Because even before having that physical experiences, I have had many ego experiences. And if you know about astrology, I am actually a Scorpio rising, and I believe I, have some strong Scorpio energies. So if you know, you know. But essentially, I've always been transformative, and I have had to go through parts of myself, parts of my identity dying in order for me to become more of who I am today and what you see today. So yeah, I also this year lost my mum, so that itself had a profound impact on me. And whenever somebody passes or transitions in your life, whether you're close to them or not, as we sometimes see with important figures that pass, it again has an impact on life. And that is the link that I want to keep making here. We like to look at death as separate from life, but death directly impacts life, right? When my mom died, it directly impacted me, my life. And it caused me to again reflect and reevaluate life, where I am, where I've been, where I'm going. So, this is why the topic is called Die to Live. Because as much as we do talk about it, but we don't talk about it as plainly sometimes. In order to live to the fullest, things have to die. And you have to be okay with and comfortable with death. That's why I'm saying die to live, because we are comfortable with the action of living, but are we comfortable with the concept and the idea of dying, despite all knowing that that is what is coming next? The more you are able to accept transformation, endings, death, whether that is metaphorical, metaphysical, in real life, the more you will become comfortable with, especially if you have an immense fear of death, the more you will become comfortable with the idea, the concept of death. Because death is transformation. All of these things that we're talking about are all one thing, like I'm trying to say. When you are rigid, when you cling too much to life, when you are afraid of transformation, of endings, of shifts, of changing or letting go of ways of being, ways of thinking, you are more and more afraid of death, of change, and you want to cling more to and cover yourself, elude yourself, delude yourself more with the idea and the concept of life. Yet death is still there. It is still present. That is why, for example, we know that the only constant is change. That itself shows you how much this thing that we, again, don't feel too comfortable with, especially when it comes to ourselves or those close to us, is part of life. Because the only thing that is guaranteed is that things will change, whether that's the weather, whether that's nature, whether that's your skin, whether that's your surroundings, whether that's anything. It all goes back to something must end for something to begin, and for something to begin, something must end, and so it goes on and on. So yeah, let me refer back to my notes. But you know, I just wanted to touch on that because I had so many, like I said, transformations in the last 2 years, including even leaving my job, leaving that idea and that identity, which I have another video about. You know, again, if you are interested or you care to hear about it or resonate with that topic. But yeah, guys, when I lost my mum, when she died, a part of me also died. Not just in mourning and in loss, but in awakening. The part of me that thought for so long that to love meant to be attached but not even just to be attached, because I was okay with detaching from her. It was feeling that there was something that I had to do, that I had to do, or that I was the one who was in control or able to control whether, life or death. Ultimately, death was, death is. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Despite whatever I thought that I could do with my life to affect her life, to impact her life, the reality is that everything will and must come to an end. And when it does, how will you accept that? And what will you allow that to tell you about yourself, about what has happened, about what has occurred, about where you are now? That is what I had to look at. Death, this death of my mother especially, has taught me a lot about, as cliche as it may sound, what it means to be alive, because I had an interesting relationship with her, which I've touched on in the first episode, if you're interested in watching that. And, like I said, in many ways, I felt responsible for her, but we are not responsible for anyone but ourselves, or anything but ourselves, and how we respond to these circumstances and situations. And how we live, truly, So, yeah. I would also love to hear from any of you guys if you have been impacted by death, ego death, actual death in any way, if you have a fear of death, if this is a topic that unnerves you, where you stand on this topic, if you have a fascination with death, which some people do. Not too spooky now, but you know what I mean. Where do you stand on this topic, on this concept of dying to live? When it comes back to, our community, this community, Black Swan community, Black Swan theory, all of you beautiful Black Swans, I just want to remind you that whether you want to call it death, change, transformation, it is the unexpected yet necessary disruption, interruption, that reshapes us completely. When you feel like a part of you has to change, when you feel like you have to let go of certain habits, when you feel like you can't be around certain people anymore, when you feel like you can't stay at a job anymore, you feel like you can't live this way anymore, you can't stay in a country anymore, these feelings are not there to punish you. These feelings are there to prepare you for life, for change, and for what we all know that is coming, which is death. Because the scariest thing about death is not living to the fullest, not living your truth, not living. And that is why it is so important to accept, acknowledge, and embrace and understand death in life. Because without that, with the sense or feeling of running onwards and onwards, living forever, or trying to just do as much as you can while you can, you may end up doing the wrong things. You may end up not fulfilling yourself or living a true life, because you're not being true to yourself. You're not being real with the fact that this is not going to last forever, and that the choices you make do leave some or none impact. That is up to you. So yeah, every ending creates space for something that could not exist before. And life itself is not linear, okay? It spirals, and we meet new versions of ourselves, we lose them, and then we find new ones again. But as I said, without something ending, how can something new begin? It's so much a part of our life that we skim over it. But it's as simple as, it goes as deep as, even though it sounds like such a simple example, but if you're listening to your favorite song, or you have two songs that you love, you can't listen to one song without the other song ending. You also can't listen to that same song again without it ending for you to start it again. And it's, like I said, so much a part of our life that sometimes we don't see it, or we don't want to see it for what it is, or we call it different things. But it is transformation, it is death, and we do die in so many little ways in order to live. Whether we, again, are comfortable with that or acknowledge that or don't. Remember that we black swans, we don't fear the storm, we become it, and through it, we are reborn, okay? We don't fear change, we don't fear being different, because to be a black swan is to be born in the face of adversity, to be molded and shaped in the face of adversity, and to be graceful and glide, onwards in the face of adversity. So yeah, remember that if you identify with this community, with this video, with the concept of being a black swan, no change or transformation is greater than your ability to take it in and make from it what you will, and more of yourself. So to conclude, I have a couple of questions that I want you guys to reflect on. So we've died to live. Now how do we live after dying, after all this death, right? You can ask yourself certain questions now, or maybe even for previous parts of your life that you're still trying to understand, right? You can pose these questions to that version of yourself then, or this version of yourself now, and ask yourself, what version of yourself are you being asked to release right now? What would happen if you stopped resisting change and allowed it to transform you? And who are you becoming after the loss, after transition, after death? These are questions that you can journal on. You can just ask yourself and sit there and think about it, or talk to someone else, ask each other, or meditate and ponder on these answers and what they mean to you. But yes, I would like to, there's so much more, and I could make another video about this topic if you guys liked it, but death is never the end, and a beautiful metaphor for that is the phoenix, right? So the phoenix is reborn from ashes. It is burned, it dies, and it rises again from the ashes, right? A flame, alive. And fire even represents life for many, many reasons, as you could research for yourself. But yes, to die to live means to let the illusion fall apart so that truth can breathe again. You are not what you have lost, you are what survived it. And you are the fact that you survived it. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Again, you are not what you have lost. You are not what has been lost. You are not what has changed. You are what survived those transitions, those losses, those deaths, and is here now. That is you. That is your power. Don't ever feel weakened by something that is, like I said, so a part of life. Allow it to strengthen you, to mold you, and to make you better, and to make you better, more equipped. Anyways, sorry for the abrupt ending, guys. My phone is out of storage. A bug flew on my lip, so I think it's time to end things here. But I will see you in the next one. As always, comment your thoughts, your ideas, how you feel on the topic, and you can always suggest what other topics you'd like to hear. I hope to see you in episode 4 of Black Swan Theory. Until then, take so much care of yourself. Bye bye.